Namaste Dostin, welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving deep into a topic that has fascinated people for decades, the Apollo 11 mission. You know the story, Neil Armstrong, 1969, one small step for man, giant leap for mankind. But like any extraordinary event, the Apollo 11 mission has attracted its fair share of skepticism and conspiracy theories. Let's get started. One of the most persistent conspiracy theories revolves around the American flag planted on the lunar surface. You've probably seen the images. The flag appears to be waving in the wind. Now, anyone with even a rudimentary understanding of celestial bodies knows there's no atmosphere, and therefore no wind, on the moon. The flag wasn't actually waving, it was designed to give that impression. The flag was mounted on a telescoping pole with a horizontal bar at the top to ensure it remained unfurled. The wrinkles and ripples in the flag were caused by the way it was folded and stored during the journey to the moon. If the flag were truly flapping in the wind, wouldn't it be constantly moving in the footage? But it remains static, except for when the astronauts are handling it. Furthermore, if you observe the flag closely, you'll notice that it maintains the same rippled shape throughout the footage. The fact that the flag's shape remains consistent is further proof that it wasn't subject to any external forces like wind. Remember the telescoping pole, the horizontal bar, and the wrinkles caused by storage. These mundane details hold the key to debunking this persistent myth. Another claim made by those who doubt the moon landing is the absence of stars in the photographs taken by the Apollo 11 astronauts. They argue that if the astronauts were truly on the moon, the sky should have been teeming with stars, far more brilliant than what we see from Earth. This argument reveals a fundamental misunderstanding of photography, and the challenges of capturing images in space. The moon's surface reflects a significant amount of sunlight, creating a very bright foreground. To properly expose the photographs and capture details of the astronauts and the lunar surface, the cameras used on the Apollo missions had to be set with fast shutter speeds and small apertures. These settings make it virtually impossible to capture faint objects like stars in the background. Think of it like trying to take a picture of a friend standing in front of a car's headlights. The brightness of the lunar surface, illuminated by the sun, washed out the relatively faint light from distant stars. The Apollo astronauts were on a tight schedule, focused on conducting scientific experiments and collecting lunar samples. Their primary objective was to explore the moon's surface, and their photographic equipment was optimized for that purpose. So the next time someone tries to convince you that the missing stars are evidence of a hoax, remind them of the challenges of photographing in space and the limitations of the equipment used by the Apollo astronauts. Conspiracy theorists often point to perceived inconsistencies in the shadows cast by objects in the Apollo photographs as evidence of fakery. They claim that these shadows, which sometimes appear to be at odd angles or diverge from one another, are proof that artificial light sources were used during the filming of the moon landing. They argue that the shadows should be parallel, but in some images, they appear to converge or diverge, suggesting artificial light sources were used. This argument is often presented as a smoking gun, a clear indication that the entire event was staged on a set here on Earth. However, this argument ignores a fundamental principle of perspective and the unique conditions on the lunar surface. Perspective plays a crucial role in how we perceive shadows and light, and the moon's environment adds another layer of complexity. We are used to seeing parallel lines converge in the distance here on Earth. Think of railroad tracks or a long straight road disappearing into the horizon. This visual phenomenon is a result of perspective, where parallel lines appear to meet as they extend into the distance. This is a perspective effect, and it applies to shadows as well. Shadows cast by objects will appear to change direction based on the viewer's angle and the surface on which they fall. Even if the light source is very far away, like the sun, shadows cast on a three-dimensional surface will appear to converge or diverge depending on your viewing angle. This is especially true on the moon, where the lack of atmosphere means there is no scattering of light. The moon's surface is not a flat, uniform plane. It is a rugged landscape filled with craters, hills, and valleys, each contributing to the way shadows are cast and perceived. It's covered in craters, hills, and valleys. These features create a complex interplay of light and shadow which can easily be misinterpreted if one is not familiar with the lunar environment. This uneven topography can cause distortions in the shadows, making them appear to bend or change direction. The angles and lengths of shadows can vary dramatically over short distances due to the irregular surface. The lunar dust itself plays a role in how we perceive shadows. This fine, powdery substance can reflect and scatter light in unique ways, further affecting the appearance of shadows. Unlike Earth, where we have a thick atmosphere that scatters light, the Moon has a very tenuous atmosphere. This lack of atmospheric scattering means that light travels in a much straighter path on the Moon. This means that light on the Moon travels in a much straighter path, resulting in sharper, more defined shadows. These shadows can appear more pronounced and stark compared to those on Earth. So the next time you hear someone questioning the authenticity of the Moon landing based on the direction of shadows, remember the principles of perspective, the unevenness of the lunar surface, and the unique way light interacts with lunar dust. These factors together create the visual effects that some mistakenly interpret as evidence of a hoax. One enduring image from the Apollo 11 mission is the iconic footprint of Neil Armstrong in the lunar dust. This single image has become a symbol of human achievement and exploration, capturing the imagination of millions around the world. It's a poignant reminder of humanity's first steps on another celestial body, a testament to our curiosity and drive to explore the unknown. However, some conspiracy theorists have latched onto these footprints, claiming they're too well-defined, too perfect to have been made in the dry, airless environment of the Moon. They argue that the footprints look like they were made in wet sand, suggesting a staged event here on Earth. They argue that the footprints look like they were made in wet sand, suggesting a staged event here on Earth. This theory, however, overlooks the unique conditions present on the lunar surface. On Earth, footprints are quickly eroded by wind and rain. The atmosphere and the presence of moisture constantly work to reshape the landscape, including our footprints. The atmosphere and the presence of moisture constantly work to reshape the landscape, including our footprints. This is a stark contrast to the conditions found on the Moon. However, the Moon has virtually no atmosphere to speak of, and there's certainly no liquid water on its surface. This means there's nothing to erode or disturb the lunar dust. Once a footprint is made, it can remain undisturbed for an incredibly long time, potentially millions of years. The lack of atmosphere also means that the dust particles themselves are not subject to the same weathering processes as on Earth. They remain sharp and well-defined, which contributes to the clarity of the footprints. The lunar dust, being fine and cohesive, takes on the shape of the astronauts' boots, with remarkable fidelity. So, the next time you see those crisp footprints on the Moon, don't think of wet sand or staged sets. Think of the unique properties of the lunar environment, the absence of erosion, and the fine, powdery nature of lunar dust. These footprints are a lasting impression of humanity's first steps beyond our home planet, a testament to our enduring spirit of exploration. Perhaps the most outlandish claim made by Apollo conspiracy theorists is that the entire mission was faked, filmed on a Hollywood soundstage or a remote desert location. They suggest that the iconic footage of astronauts walking on the Moon was nothing more than an elaborate hoax, orchestrated by the US government to win the space race against the Soviet Union. They argue that the technology of the 1960s was simply not advanced enough to send humans to the Moon and back. The computers were primitive by today's standards, and the spacecraft were seen as too rudimentary to handle such a complex mission. Firstly, if the Moon landing were faked, it would have required the complicity of thousands of people, scientists, engineers, technicians, and even the astronauts themselves. The sheer number of individuals who would need to be in on the secret makes the idea of a cover-up highly improbable. Not only would such a massive conspiracy be virtually impossible to keep secret, but it also insults the intelligence and integrity of the brilliant minds who dedicated their lives to the Apollo program. These were people who worked tirelessly, often at great personal sacrifice, to achieve what was once thought impossible. The sheer technical challenges of faking a moon landing in 1969 would have been insurmountable. The special effects technology of the time was nowhere near advanced enough to create a believable lunar environment. Remember, this was decades before the advent of CGI and advanced special effects. Filmmakers of the era relied on practical effects, which would have been glaringly obvious to experts and even the general public. To create a convincing illusion, the filmmakers would have had to invent technologies that simply didn't exist at the time. The lighting, the shadows, the physics of movement in a low-gravity environment, all of these would have been nearly impossible to replicate accurately. Consider the lunar landscape. It's not just a barren wasteland. The surface of the moon is a complex, geologically diverse environment. It's a complex, geologically diverse environment with craters, mountains, and vast plains covered in a fine, powdery dust. The level of detail captured in the Apollo footage would have been extraordinarily difficult to fake. Recreating this environment with even a modicum of accuracy would have been a monumental task. The shadows, the dust, the way the light interacts with the surface, all these elements would have to be perfect to avoid detection. Finally, and perhaps most convincingly, we have the physical evidence brought back from the moon, hundreds of pounds of lunar rocks and soil. These samples have unique properties that are distinct from any terrestrial materials. These rocks have been analyzed by scientists around the world and have been confirmed to have originated on the moon. The isotopic compositions, the presence of certain minerals, and the lack of weathering all point to an extraterrestrial origin. The Apollo 11 mission was not a product of Hollywood magic. It was a triumph of human ingenuity, perseverance, and a testament to our unquenchable thirst for exploration. The evidence overwhelmingly supports the reality of the moon landings, leaving little room for doubt. The Apollo 11 mission was a defining moment in human history. It pushed the boundaries of what we thought was possible and ignited the imaginations of people around the world. The evidence overwhelmingly supports the fact that the Apollo 11 mission was real, so the next time you gaze up at the moon, remember the brave astronauts who ventured into the unknown, the brilliant minds who made their journey possible, and the enduring legacy of the Apollo 11 mission. Keep questioning, keep exploring, and always look up at the stars with a sense of wonder and curiosity.